I'd always thought my life with Emily was something solid, like a house built on stone instead of sand. We'd been together 12 years, married for 10, and she was the kind of woman who made people jealous just by existing. Blonde hair that caught the sunlight like it was designed to, green eyes that could make you feel like the only person in the room, and a laugh that felt like a reward. I'm James, by the way. 42, decent job in logistics, not bad looking if I do say so myself, though I've got a few more gray hairs than I'd like. We lived in a quiet suburb outside Chicago, a place where the biggest drama was usually whose dog dug up whose garden. That was until I found the first crack in the foundation. It started with a phone call I wasn't supposed to hear. I'd come home early from work one Tuesday. Some shipment got delayed, so I figured I'd surprise her with takeout from that Thai place she loved. The house was quiet when I walked in, just the hum of the fridge and the faint tick of the clock in the living room. I set the bags down on the counter and heard her voice drifting from upstairs. She was on the phone, giggling in a way I hadn't heard in years. Not with me, anyway. I crept closer, not because I suspected anything, but because curiosity's a funny thing. Pulls you along before you even know why. "I can't wait to see you again," she said, her tone soft and playful. Last time was unforgettable. My stomach twisted, but I told myself it was nothing. Maybe she was talking to a friend, planning a girls' night. Then she added, "No, James won't suspect a thing. He's too busy with work." That's when the ground shifted under me. I stood there, frozen at the bottom of the stairs, listening as she wrapped up the call with a whispered, "See you tomorrow." When she came down a minute later, she jumped a little seeing me there, then smiled like nothing was wrong. "You're home early," she said, kissing my cheek. I nodded, forcing a grin, but my mind was already spinning. That night I couldn't sleep. Her words looped in my head. Unforgettable. Suspect a thing. Tomorrow. I stared at the ceiling while she slept beside me, her breathing steady, her arm flung across my chest like always. I wanted to shake her awake, demand answers, but something colder took root instead. I needed proof. I needed to know who she was meeting and what unforgettable meant, so I decided to play the game she thought I was too dumb to notice. The next day, I'd call in sick, follow her, and see where this crack led. I wasn't ready for how deep it would go. Morning came and I put on the best performance of my life. I coughed into my sleeve at breakfast, told Emily I felt off and said I'd stay home. She tilted her head, all concern and sweetness, and pressed a hand to my forehead. "You don't feel warm," she said, but I shrugged it off, mumbling about a headache. She didn't push it, just kissed me goodbye and said she'd be out running errands most of the day. Errands, right? I watched her pull out of the driveway in her silver Honda, then grabbed my keys and followed at a distance in my truck, heart pounding like I was some kind of amateur detective. She didn't go to the grocery store or the dry cleaners. Instead, she drove 20 minutes to a coffee shop downtown, one of those trendy places with overpriced lattes and too many plants. I parked across the street, slouched low in my seat, and watched her walk inside. She wore that red dress I loved, the one that hugged her in all the right places, and her hair was down, loose and perfect. I almost convinced myself I was overreacting. Maybe she was meeting a friend after all until he showed up. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair slicked back like he'd stepped out of a cologne ad. I knew him instantly, Ryan Gosling. Not the actor, obviously, but the Ryan Gosling from her old college days. She'd mentioned him once or twice, always with a laugh, like he was some harmless memory. He wasn't laughing now, though. He was leaning across the table, brushing her hand with his, and she was beaming like a teenager. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white, watching them talk and laugh for an hour. They didn't kiss, didn't do anything obvious, but the way she looked at him told me everything. It wasn't just coffee. It was a promise. When they left, I tailed them again, this time to a boutique hotel a few blocks away. She didn't even glance around as they walked inside, arm in arm. I didn't follow them in, I couldn't. My chest felt like it was caving in, and all I could do was drive home, replaying every moment of the last 12 years, wondering how many lies I'd swallowed. Back at the house, I poured myself a whiskey and sat in the dark, waiting for her to come home. She did, hours later, carrying a grocery bag as a prop, some half-hearted alibi about traffic and long lines. She chattered about her day, oblivious to the storm brewing in me. I nodded along, smiling, but inside I was plotting. I wouldn't confront her yet. No, I'd let her think she'd won. Let her dig herself deeper. Revenge wasn't just about catching her. It was about making her feel the weight of what she'd done. And I had an idea forming, something slow and sharp, something she'd never see coming. The next few days were a blur of pretending. I went to work, came home, ate dinner with Emily like nothing had changed. She'd ask about my day, I'd ask about hers, and she'd spin these effortless stories. Book club, yoga, a new recipe she wanted to try. I'd nod, sip my beer, and imagine her in that hotel room with Ryan. Her college ghost turned flesh and blood betrayal. It wasn't just the act itself that gnawed at me. It was the ease of her lies, the way she'd built this whole second life while I was hauling freight schedules and paying our mortgage. I started digging, quietly, methodically, like a man uncovering a buried crime scene. First, I checked her phone when she was in the shower. She'd gotten sloppy, hadn't even bothered with a lock screen anymore. Probably figured I'd never look. There were texts from Rachel, her supposed yoga buddy, but the messages didn't match the cover. "Can't stop thinking about yesterday," one said. "Your trouble," another with a winking emoji. I scrolled further, found plans to meet again Friday at the same hotel. My hands shook as I snapped photos of the screen with my own phone, evidence piling up like bricks for the wall I was building. Then I checked her laptop, left open on the kitchen table one morning. Emails from a burner account to someone named R. Intimate, playful, nothing a friend would write. I printed those too, stashing them in a locked drawer at work. I didn't stop there. I remembered Ryan's last name from a college photo she'd once shown me. Gosling, same as the actor, which she'd giggled about back then. A quick search online pulled up his LinkedIn. Ryan Gosling, 41, architect, based in Chicago. Married, 2 kids. Perfect little bio about loving life and good design. Hypocrite. I found his wife's profile too. Sarah Gosling, 38, pediatric nurse, all smiles in her profile pic. She didn't know yet, but she'd be part of this soon. I wasn't just angry at Emily anymore. Ryan had walked into my life like it was his to take, and that made it personal. By Thursday, I had a plan. Emily thought she was meeting Ryan again tomorrow, but I'd be there first. I called in sick again, drove to the hotel early, and paid the desk clerk, a kid barely out of high school, $100 to let me into their usual room. He didn't ask questions, just handed me a key card and looked the other way. I set up a small camera in the corner, hidden behind a lamp, and tested it on my phone. Crystal clear. Whatever happened tomorrow, I'd have it recorded, not for me, but for what came next. I left before they arrived, my pulse racing, knowing I was crossing a line I couldn't uncross. Friday morning, I watched Emily leave again, her usual errands, excuse trailing behind her like perfume. She wore that red dress again, and I wondered if Ryan had picked it out, if it was some private signal between them. I stayed home this time, letting the camera do the work. The app on my phone pinged when it started recording, motion activated, just like I'd set it. I didn't watch live. I couldn't stomach it yet. Instead, I sat in our living room, staring at the framed photo of us on our honeymoon in Hawaii, her arms around me, both of us grinning like the world was ours. The footage would wait until she was back, until I could face it with her lies still fresh in the air. She came home at 6, humming, a shopping bag in hand. Another prop. "Good day?" I asked, voice steady. "Great day," she said, pecking my cheek. "Got some stuff for dinner." I nodded, poured us both wine, and waited until she was in bed, asleep, before I pulled up the video. It was worse than I'd imagined. Not just the act itself, though that was a knife in the gut, but the way they talked after, laughing about me. "He's so predictable," she said, sprawled across the bed. "Works late, comes home, doesn't even notice." Ryan chuckled, tracing her arm. "Lucky for us." I stopped it there, bile rising in my throat, and deleted nothing. It was fuel now. Saturday, I started the next phase. I called Sarah Gosling, Ryan's wife, from a burner phone I'd picked up. "Hi, Sarah. You don't know me, but I have something you need to see," I said, keeping my voice calm. She sounded confused but agreed to meet at a park near her house. No questions, just a mother's instinct kicking in. Maybe. I brought a USB with the video, edited to show just enough. Ryan walking in with Emily, their hands tangled, the door closing. I didn't include the rest. Didn't need to. When Sarah saw it, her face went pale, then hard. "How long?" she asked. "Weeks, maybe months," I said. "I'm James, Emily's husband." She nodded, eyes burning, and took the USB. "He's done," she whispered. I believed her. That night, I cooked dinner for Emily like nothing was wrong, steak, her favorite. She chattered about her day, oblivious to the storm I'd unleashed. Sarah would confront Ryan soon, and I'd let that play out. But my revenge wasn't just about him, it was about her, about making her feel the slow crush of losing everything she thought she controlled. I'd already started moving money, quietly shifting half our savings into a new account she couldn't touch. She'd notice eventually, but not yet. Not until it was too late. Sunday was quiet, too quiet, like the air before a tornado touches down. Emily went to brunch with friends. Another lie, probably. But I didn't follow her this time. I had bigger moves to make. Sarah texted me from a number she'd given me at the park. "Talk to him." He denied it until I showed the video. "He's gone." I didn't ask where Ryan went. Hotel, friend's couch, didn't matter. What mattered was Sarah's next line. "I want her to pay too." I stared at that message for a long time, feeling a strange kinship with this woman I'd never met before yesterday. We were both collateral damage, but we weren't helpless. I spent the day digging deeper into Emily's world. I called her best friend, Lisa, pretending to plan a surprise party. Lisa spilled without even realizing it. Emily hadn't been to book club in weeks, hadn't mentioned yoga in months. "She's been so busy lately," Lisa said, clueless. "Busy." Yeah. I thanked her and hung up, then went through our joint credit card statements online. Charges I'd ignored before jumped out. Hotel rooms, dinners, a lingerie shop I'd never heard of. Every receipt was a brick in the case I was building, not for a lawyer but for something uglier. Monday, I took it further. I met Sarah again, this time at a diner far from our neighborhoods. She looked tired, but her jaw was set, like she'd found steel inside herself. "I'm not just leaving him," she said over coffee. "I'm taking everything, house, kids, his reputation." I told her my plan. Ruin Emily's life piece by piece, starting with her lies. Sarah suggested something brilliant. Send the video to Emily's boss, an uptight woman at the PR firm where she worked. "She'll be done there," Sarah said. I agreed, but I wanted more. I wanted Emily to feel trapped, exposed, helpless, the way I'd felt watching her with him. That afternoon, I emailed the video from an anonymous account to Emily's boss, CCING, a few coworkers for good measure. I kept it short. "Thought you should know who you're employing." By evening, Emily came home rattled, pale, saying there'd been drama at work. "Someone sent something awful," she said, voice shaking. I played dumb, asked what happened, and she dodged it, mumbling about a misunderstanding. I poured her wine, smiled, and let her stew. The cracks were spreading, and I was just getting started. Tuesday morning, Emily barely touched her coffee. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at her phone, her fingers trembling as she scrolled. I pretended not to notice, flipping through a newspaper I wasn't reading. "Everything okay?" I asked, casual as could be. She flinched, then forced a smile. "Just work stuff. It'll blow over." I nodded, sipping my own coffee, knowing it wouldn't. The email I'd sent yesterday had done its job. Her pristine reputation at the PR firm was crumbling. I'd checked her work's public Slack channel. She'd left the login on her laptop months ago, and saw the whispers. "Did you see it? Is that really her? She's toast." By noon, she'd get a call from HR, maybe even her boss. I couldn't wait to see her face. She left for the office, and I got to work on the next piece. I drove to a print shop downtown, one of those hole-in-the-wall places that doesn't ask questions. I'd spent the night editing stills from the hotel video. Nothing too graphic, just enough to show Emily and Ryan tangled up, laughing, her red dress unmistakable. I printed 50 copies, big glossy ones, and stuffed them into envelopes. Then I mailed them to her parents, her sister, our neighbors, even Lisa from the fake party call. No note, no explanation, just the pictures. Let them figure it out. I imagined her mom's gasp, her dad's quiet fury, the gossip rippling through our cul-de-sac. Emily loved being the golden girl. I'd turn her into a scandal. When she came home that night, she was a wreck. Mascara streaked her cheeks, and she wouldn't meet my eyes. "Rough day?" I asked, stirring pasta on the stove. She mumbled something about a meeting gone wrong, then locked herself in the bathroom. I heard the shower running for an hour, but it didn't wash away what I knew. Her boss had suspended her pending an investigation. I checked her email again. She'd left it open, still clueless about my access. The message was curt, professional, devastating. I plated the pasta, called her to dinner, and watched her pick at it in silence. She didn't suspect me yet, but the noose was tightening. Later, I got a text from Sarah. "He's begging to come back." I said no. Sent the video to his firm too. Ryan's architecture career was circling the drain now, just like Emily's. I replied, "Good. She's cracking." Sarah sent a thumbs up, and I felt that strange bond again. Two strangers united by betrayal, wielding it like a weapon. I wasn't done, though. Emily's world still had too many pieces standing. I'd knock them down one by one until she had nothing left to hold on to. Wednesday, the photos hit their targets. Emily's phone started buzzing mid-morning, and she silenced it without looking, her face pale as chalk. I was working from home, again, parked at the dining table with my laptop, watching her unravel. Then the doorbell rang. It was Lisa, her best friend, clutching one of the envelopes, her expression a mix of shock and pity. What is this?" she demanded, shoving it at her. Emily stammered, tried to laugh it off. "It's not what it looks like." But Lisa wasn't buying it. "You're my friend. But this? With Ryan? James deserves better." She stormed out, leaving Emily crumpled on the couch, sobbing. I played the concerned husband, kneeling beside her. "What's wrong, babe? What did Lisa mean?" She shook her head, tears soaking her shirt, and said it was a misunderstanding. I pressed gently, coaxing out half-truths. Someone was spreading lies, photos, trying to ruin her. "Who would do that?" I asked, all wide-eyed innocence. She didn't answer, just buried her face in her hands. I rubbed her back, hiding my smirk. The neighbors were next. I'd seen Mrs. Carter across the street peering out her window, envelope in hand, already on the phone. By evening, Emily's perfect little bubble was a ghost town. That night, I took it up a notch. I'd found an old burner phone of hers in a drawer, one she'd used for work trips that never added up. I powered it on, found Ryan's number still saved, and sent him a text. "Meet me tomorrow. Same place. We need to talk." I signed it with her initial E. He replied within minutes. "Thought you were done with me. 2 p.m. I typed back, "Yes, don't be late." I'd be there instead, not her, and he wouldn't like what I had to say. I deleted the thread, tucked the phone away, and slept better than I had in weeks. Thursday morning, Emily got a call from her mom. I heard the yelling through the receiver. Her parents were disgusted, ashamed, cutting her off until she fixed this mess. She hung up, dazed, and I offered her tea, playing the doting fool. She didn't know I'd mailed them the proof, didn't know I'd turned her family against her. She was alone now, cornered, and I was just warming up. Thursday afternoon, I drove to the hotel, the same boutique spot where Emily and Ryan had built their secret. I wore a baseball cap and sunglasses. Not much of a disguise, but enough to blend in. Ryan showed up at 2 p.m. sharp, looking nervous, pacing outside the entrance. I stepped out of my truck, hands in my pockets, and walked up behind him. "Looking for someone?" I said, voice low. He turned, saw me, and froze. "James?" His face went white like he'd seen a ghost. "Yeah," I said. Surprise. He tried to backpedal, mumbling about a mistake, but I cut him off. "Save it. I know everything. The hotel, the texts, the laughs at my expense." I pulled out my phone, showed him a still from the video, him and Emily mid-embrace. His jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. "What do you want?" he asked, voice shaky. I smiled, cold and slow. "I want you to feel what I felt. Sarah's got the video. Your firm's got it. Your life's over, Ryan. But I'm not done with you or her." He lunged at me, fists clenched, but I stepped back, hands up. "Hit me and it's worse," I said. "I've got copies everywhere." He stopped, breathing hard, then turned and bolted. I didn't chase him. I didn't need to. Back home, Emily was a shell. Her phone off, her eyes red, muttering about fixing things. I cooked dinner again, kept up the act, but I could see her breaking. Then Sarah called me. His firm fired him. He's crashing at a buddy's place, crying like a baby. I thanked her, then checked Emily's laptop one more time. She'd emailed Ryan. "What's happening?" "Everyone knows." But his reply bounced. He'd blocked her or maybe ditched the account. Good. Let her feel the abandonment. That night, I moved more money, another chunk of our savings, into my hidden account. She'd notice soon, but by then, it'd be too late. I also drafted an email to her sister, pretending to be Emily, confessing everything in pathetic detail. "I messed up. I don't know how to stop. I'd send it tomorrow, let the family implode further." Revenge wasn't loud. It was a quiet, creeping thing, and I was its architect. Friday, Emily didn't leave the house. She stayed in pajamas, pacing, jumping at every noise. Her phone was back on, but it only brought bad news. Texts from coworkers saying she was done. A voicemail from HR confirming her suspension was now a termination. I watched from the sidelines, pretending to work, offering her coffee she didn't drink. Then the mail came. Her sister had replied to my fake email. I'd sent it at dawn, and the letter was brutal. "You're a disgrace," it read. "Don't call me until you've told James the truth." Emily read it, dropped it, and ran upstairs, slamming the bedroom door. I followed, knocked softly. What's going on?" She opened the door a crack, eyes wild. "Everyone hates me," she whispered. "I don't know why this is happening." I hugged her, let her cry into my shirt, and murmured, "We'll figure it out." Inside, I was grinning. She still didn't see me pulling the strings. Didn't know I turned her life into a house of cards and lit the match. That afternoon, I called the bank, finalized the transfer. Our savings were now split, half hers, half mine, but hers was locked in a trust she couldn't access without my signature. A little legal trick I'd researched. She'd find out when she tried to run. Sarah texted again. "He's begging for forgiveness. I'm filing for divorce." I replied, "Same here soon." She's got nothing left. Emily's world was shrinking. Friends gone, family gone, job gone. I'd saved the best for last, though. I'd found an old college buddy of mine, a PI named Mark, who owed me a favor. I sent him the video, asked him to dig into Ryan's past. Affairs, debts, anything dirty. If there was more to use, I'd find it. Mark promised results by Monday. I thanked him and started packing a bag. Not to leave, but to make her think I might. That night, Emily begged me to stay home tomorrow. "I need you," she said, clinging to my arm. I nodded, promised I would. But I was already planning Saturday's move. She'd wake up to a surprise she couldn't outrun. Saturday morning, I let Emily sleep in. She'd cried herself out the night before, clinging to me like I was her lifeline. Ironic, considering I was the one sinking her ship. I slipped downstairs, brewed coffee, and waited for the delivery. At 9 a.m., a courier dropped off a thick envelope. No return address, just her name in bold print. I'd paid Mark extra to rush it. A dossier on Ryan, dug up from his past. Affairs with 2 coworkers. A DUI he'd buried. Gambling debts he'd hidden from Sarah. I added a note in my own handwriting. "You picked a winner, M." I left it on the counter where she'd see it, then stepped outside to call Sarah. "He's a mess," she said. "Came by last night, drunk, begging." I called the cops. I laughed, told her about the dossier. "Send it to his buddies," she suggested. "Let them ditch him too." I agreed, scanned it, and emailed copies to every contact I'd found in Ryan's LinkedIn network. Anonymous, of course. By noon, Emily stumbled downstairs, saw the envelope, and opened it. Her gasp was audible from the porch where I sat, pretending to read. She stormed out, waving the papers. "Who's doing this?" she yelled. I shrugged. "All innocence. Looks like someone's mad at you." She didn't buy it this time. "You know something," she said, eyes narrowing. "You've been too calm." I stood, met her gaze. "Maybe I'm just tired of your lies." She froze, then backed off, retreating inside. The seed was planted. She suspected me now, but she had no proof, no leverage. I followed her in, watched her try the bank app. Her face fell when it showed half our savings gone, locked away. "What did you do?" she whispered. I smiled. "Just protecting myself." That afternoon, I dropped the final bomb. I'd hired a lawyer weeks ago, quietly, and filed for divorce. The papers arrived at 3 p.m., served by a bored-looking guy in a polo shirt. Emily signed for them, hands shaking, and read the terms. I wanted the house, full assets, no alimony. She'd get nothing but her car and whatever scraps she could scrape together. She looked at me, tears streaming, and said, "Why?" I leaned in close, voice ice cold. "Because you thought I'd never notice." Then I walked out, leaving her with the wreckage. Saturday evening, I didn't go far, just to a motel a few miles away, a cheap place with flickering lights and stained carpets. I needed Emily to stew in the mess I'd left behind, to feel the walls closing in without me there to play the buffer. She called me 10 times that night, leaving voicemails that started with tears and ended with screams. "James, please come home," she begged in the first. "You can't do this to me," she shrieked in the last. I didn't answer. I sat on the lumpy bed, sipping a beer, and listened to each one, letting her panic fuel me. She still didn't get it. She thought she could claw her way back, but I'd burned every bridge she had. Sunday morning, I checked in with Mark, my PI buddy. He'd found more on Ryan. A mistress from 3 years ago who'd threatened to sue him, hushed up with a payoff. Mark had tracked her down. She was willing to talk for the right price. I wired her $1,000 through a Cash App, and she sent me screenshots of old texts, Ryan promising her the world while married to Sarah. I forwarded them to Sarah with a note, "For your lawyer." Then I sent copies to Emily's burner phone, no message, just the evidence. Let her see the man she'd risked everything for was a fraud twice over. Back at the house, I knew chaos was brewing. Mrs. Carter, the nosy neighbor, texted me. Yes, I'd given her my number years ago for emergencies. "Emily's packing bags," she wrote, "screaming about you and some guy." I thanked her, told her to keep an eye out. Emily wouldn't leave easily. She loved that house, our life, the image of it all. But I'd make sure she had no choice. I called the locksmith I'd booked earlier, confirmed he'd change every lock by noon. She'd come home to a fortress she couldn't enter, a final slap to her pride. When I drove by at 11 a.m., the locksmith was finishing up. Emily's car was gone. She'd probably run to her sister's or a friend's, not knowing they'd all turned on her. I thanked the guy, tipped him extra, and went inside. The place felt different, emptier, like her presence had been scrubbed out already. I found the divorce papers on the counter, and signed, next to a half-empty wine bottle. Good. Let her fight it, she'd lose. I poured the wine down the sink, tossed the bottle, and started planning the endgame. Monday, I met Sarah for coffee again, our little ritual of revenge. She looked lighter, like shedding Ryan had lifted a weight. "Divorce papers are filed," she said, stirring sugar into her cup. "He's got nothing. No job, no friends know me." I told her about the locksmith, the texts, Emily's meltdown. She laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "They deserve each other," she said. "Too bad they're both alone now." I nodded, but I wasn't done with Emily yet. Ryan was collateral damage. She was the target. Sarah handed me a USB, copies of Ryan's bank records she'd swiped before he left. Use it, she said. I would. Back at work, I took a half day and drove to Emily's office. She wasn't there. Fired, of course, but her boss was. I'd met Ms. Hargrove once at a company picnic, a stern woman who valued reputation above all. I handed her an envelope, printed emails from Emily's laptop, flirting with clients, hinting at favors for contracts. Nothing explicit, just enough to taint her forever. Thought you should know, I said. Hargrove's lips thinned, but she took it, nodded. She won't work in PR again, she said. I thanked her and left, knowing the blacklist would spread. That night, Emily showed up at the house. I watched from the window as she pounded on the door, key useless in the new locks. James, let me in, she yelled, voice raw. I didn't move. She rang the bell, kicked the frame, then slumped on the porch, crying. After an hour, she drove off, defeated. I checked my phone. Her sister had texted me. She's here, wants to talk. What do I say? I replied, tell her I'm done. Emily's last lifeline snapped. I slept in our bed alone, the silence of victory. Tuesday, I found her car parked at a gas station, windows down, her asleep inside. She'd run out of places to go. I didn't wake her, just noted it, filed it away. The trap was almost shut. Wednesday, I turned the screws tighter. I'd hired a mover the day before, a burly guy named Tony who didn't care about sob stories. I had him box up Emily's clothes, her jewelry, every trace of her from the house, and dump it on her sister's lawn. I included a note, take your trash. Her sister called me, furious. This is cruel, James. But I hung up. Cruel? She hadn't seen cruel yet. I checked our joint accounts again. Her half of the savings was still locked, but she tried to withdraw it 3 times, each denied. The bank flagged it. She'd get a letter soon, another dead end. Sarah texted me a photo. Ryan, unshaven, slumped on a bar stool somewhere. He's broke, she wrote. Used your stuff. Froze his accounts too. I grinned, imagining them both scrambling, nowhere to turn. Then I called Mark again. One last job, I said. Find out where she's staying. He tracked her to a cheap motel. Not mine, another one across town. I drove there, left an envelope at the desk. More photos, this time with a twist. I'd edited them, added timestamps from years ago, made it look like she'd been with Ryan since college. A lie, but a believable one. I tipped the clerk to slip it under her door. That afternoon, Emily called again, hysterical. These aren't real. You're ruining me. I let her rant, then said, you ruined yourself, and hung up. The fake photos were a masterstroke. Her family, her few remaining friends, they'd believe it, assume she'd lied forever. I checked her social media. She'd been locked out, hacked by someone, not me, but I didn't care who. Her perfect online life was gone, replaced by silence. I poured a whiskey, toasted the empty house, and waited for the next ripple. By evening, Mark texted, she's with Ryan, motel on 5th. Perfect. They'd crawled back to each other, 2 rats in a sinking ship. I wasn't surprised, misery loves company. But I'd make sure their reunion was a cage, not a comfort. Thursday, I struck the final blow. I'd saved Ryan's bank records from Sarah, combed through them, found a pattern. Unexplained withdrawals, cash to shady accounts. Mark confirmed it. Low-rent escorts, a habit he'd hidden from everyone. I printed the statements, circled the transactions, and mailed them to Emily at the motel. No note. Let her see the man she'd chosen. Let it fester. Then I called the cops. Anonymous tip from a payphone. Drug deal at the motel on 5th, room 12. I'd seen Ryan's type before. Panic, he'd have something on him, enough to stick. I didn't care if it was true. The chaos would do the job. Sarah met me for lunch, her divorce now rolling fast. He's got a public defender, she said, smirking. No money for better. I told her about the tip, the records. She laughed, raised her glass. To justice, she said. We drank, allies to the end. Back home, I got the call I'd waited for. Emily's sister again. "She's been arrested," she said, voice shaking. "With some guy. Drugs." I feigned shock, promised to check it out, then hung up, grinning. The tip had worked. Ryan's mess dragged her down too. Friday, I drove to the precinct, played the worried husband for the desk sergeant. "She's my wife," I said, showing the divorce papers as proof we were still legally tied. They let me see her. Disheveled, handcuffed, eyes hollow. Ryan was in another cell, caught with a baggie of pills. "James, help me," she whispered. I leaned close, whispered back, "You're on your own," and walked out. The charges might not stick, but the mugshot would. I leaked it to a local gossip blog. Anonymous, of course. Titled, "PR Princess Falls Hard." By nightfall, it was everywhere. I sold the house that afternoon, cash offer from a flipper. Packed my stuff, moved to a condo downtown. Emily's life was ash. Jobless, friendless, family gone. Now a criminal record to seal it. Ryan was the same, a ghost of his smug self. I'd won, not with fists or shouts, but with precision, patience. A revenge so complete they'd never recover. Saturday, I settled into the condo. Sleek, modern, a fresh start. The last box unpacked, I sat on the balcony, beer in hand, watching the city hum below. My phone buzzed. Sarah. Sending a screenshot of Ryan's mugshot, captioned "Karma." I texted back, her too, with Emily's blog link. We dismantled them, piece by piece, and it felt good, clean, like scrubbing a stain until it vanished. I'd kept the divorce simple, signed the final papers that morning, no contest from her. She had nothing to fight with, no money, no will. The house sale cleared, my accounts flush, her trust still locked. She'd get out of jail eventually, but to what? A void I'd carved for her. Sunday, I got a call from Lisa, of all people. "She's out on bail," she said, tentative. "Asked me to tell you she's sorry." I laughed, short and sharp. "Tell her to keep it." Lisa sighed, hung up. Sorry didn't undo the lies, the hotel, the way she'd mocked me with him. I checked the blog again. Comments piling up, old co-workers, neighbors, piling on the disgrace. Emily's name was poison now, a cautionary tale. Ryan's firm blacklisted him, his network silent. They'd rot together or apart, didn't matter to me. Monday, I went back to work, normalcy a quiet triumph. My boss clapped me on the shoulder. "Heard you're single now. Better off." I nodded, smiled, didn't explain. That night, I cooked steak, ate alone, and felt no emptiness. The revenge wasn't just theirs, it was mine, reclaiming what they tried to steal. I thought of confronting them one last time. But why? They'd seen my handiwork in the wreckage of their lives. Silence was louder. Weeks later, Mark sent a final update. Emily and Ryan, shacked up in a rundown apartment, barely scraping by. She tried calling me once more. A blocked number I didn't answer. I deleted the voicemail unheard. They weren't my problem anymore. I'd built something new. Friends, a promotion, a life untainted by her shadow. Revenge wasn't the end. It was the door I'd walked through. I locked it behind me, key tossed, and never looked back.